So every now and then I get questioned as to why I'm a fan of ULA, because after all, they're this big corporate entity who uses expendable rockets like the Atlas V that you're looking at right now. Why am I a fan of this particular company? Don't they stand for everything that I'm opposed to? Wastefulness, expendable rockets, etc.? Well, there's a number of reasons. First of all, the Atlas V, in my opinion, is not being given a fair shake by a lot of folks these days. This rocket came out a long time ago, way before the concept of reusability, at least as far as using a rocket like this in a reusable fashion. Sure, the shuttle was reusable, but the whole concept of taking off with a rocket and landing with it again seemed pretty much impossible in this day and age. And it's accomplished a tremendous amount since then, and so has ULA. For example, ULA has been the launch provider for every single US mission to Mars. Every one of them. Spirit and Opportunity and Perseverance. A ULA rocket has been behind every single one of those missions, and the vast majority of those have been successful. 20 missions in all. On top of that, ULA has also sent NASA missions to every other planet in the entire solar system. This is an accomplishment that simply no other company can claim, and that's a big deal to me. And the Atlas V has been the most reliable rocket that ULA has ever built. It is yet to have a single failed mission. Yes, it had one rocket that failed, but the payload compensated and the mission was still a success. And yes, it had a failure with the Starliner, but that can hardly be blamed on ULA. That was all Boeing. Nevertheless, I would have a serious problem with ULA if they were just resting on their laurels with the Atlas V, which is still a very successful and popular rocket, and you're going to find out just how many missions this thing has scheduled for the near future. If they were just content to stick with rockets like this, then I would have serious problems with Tory Bruno and his organization. But the thing of it is, they're not satisfied with it, as all of us know at this point. Instead, they are graduating to a far better, more advanced, and largely reusable system, at least eventually, called Vulcan Centaur. And they've put a hell of a lot of confidence in that rocket. So much confidence that they are now retiring the Atlas V, even though Vulcan is not ready because of Blue Origin. That's right, ULA is going to retire their most successful rocket, even though they have no guarantee that Vulcan Centaur is going to be successful. Is this a very brave and worthwhile gamble on their part, or corporate suicide? My name is Jordan Wright. I was born in the same year that the human race took its first steps on the surface of another world, and then we promptly betrayed those people's legacy by never going back. But now, over half a century later, there's a new breed of pioneers that are seeking to finish what these people set out to do so long ago. But there is trouble as well, so it's time for commentators like me to stop being polite and start getting angry! 8 years ago, when this Atlas V launch took place, this was the most common sight that you would see out at Cape Kennedy. Not a launch of a Falcon 9, but a launch of a ULA rocket. At this time, in the year 2013, there were only 3 Falcon 9 launches, and none of them had successful landings of their booster. There was still a lot of question as to whether or not SpaceX would ever be able to successfully reuse Falcon 9, and the Atlas seemed to be a much more reliable means of transportation. As a matter of fact, it would be another 2 years before Falcon 9 was able to successfully land a booster. So really, Falcon 9 was just as expendable as Atlas V at this time, and there was no reason to think that it was going to be any different until, of course, the historic moment when, in 2015, when Falcon 9 did have a successful booster landing and everything changed. So you would think that Atlas V would start going out of fashion since it was more expensive and since it's 100% expendable, and there would be virtually no launches in 2021, 6 years later. But believe it or not, there are more launches of the Atlas V scheduled for 2021 than there were in 2020, and more launches scheduled for 2022 than there were in 2021. Now, I emphasize scheduled, these launches have not yet taken place, but it does indicate the number of customers that ULA still has with this rocket. The Lucy mission going out to the Trojan asteroids, that's being launched by this thing. Military satellites are being launched, and of course, Starliner, assuming it actually ever flies, is going to be launched by this thing. And if Starliner fails, as I think it's likely to do, it won't be because of Atlas V. So why does this rocket have such amazing staying power? Is it because ULA's lobbyists in Congress kind of make these missions happen in spite of how much it might be costing the customer, like with some of these other launch providers? Well, not entirely. Atlas V is still capable of launching heavier payloads to more difficult orbits than Falcon 9 is. It also has a larger fairing size, so specific payloads that are simply too large for Falcon 9, either in volume or in mass, cannot be launched by Falcon 9 and therefore are still launched by Atlas V. But what about Falcon Heavy, you may ask? Well, Falcon Heavy has been used very, very little, and one of the reasons is the fact that the fairing size has not changed. It can carry up a lot more mass, but the volume is identical to Falcon 9. That being the case, Atlas V still has a lot more flexibility than any of the Falcon family rockets do at this time, which is one of the main reasons that ULA won 60% of military contracts for the next 5 years. As a matter of fact, the fairing issue was such a big deal that the military required that SpaceX build a larger fairing for Falcon Heavy in order for them to get that 40% share of military payloads for the next 5 years. This was something that Elon really didn't want to do because he's focused on Starship. So he sued the military and lost. So as a result, SpaceX needs to charge the military not only for the payloads and for the rocket, but also for the developmental costs of a new fairing. As a result, the first 2 missions under this military contract with ULA have been substantially less expensive than the SpaceX charges. We're talking 2 missions for the price of 1, actually, and this is because of the fairing developmental cost. That's going to change, obviously, but still, ULA has demonstrated that they are a worthy competitor to SpaceX, regardless of whether Elon calls them a waste of taxpayer money or not. At the moment, they simply aren't. But ULA, as I said before, are not just resting on their laurels with Atlas V. They know that they're not going to be able to continue to compete with this rocket, which is why they're developing the Vulcan Centaur. And this rocket is now seriously behind schedule, and it's all because of Blue Origin. ULA, for their part, have been doing a hell of a lot of work getting Launch Complex 41 at Cape Canaveral ready for Vulcan Centaur. They added a 300,000-gallon liquid natural gas storage area and removed the Titan catch basin. They expanded the acoustic suppression water system by installing 28-inch pipes and adding larger water tanks, simply because Vulcan is going to have a hell of a lot more thrust and therefore a lot more noise. On top of that, they installed a new 100,000-gallon Centaur liquid hydrogen tank because the top stage of Vulcan uses liquid hydrogen instead of methalox, or, well, not quite methalox, but similar fuel, and 60,000-gallon liquid oxygen storage areas on top of that. A lot of work for a rocket that doesn't have engines yet. So this new launch facility can now launch the 12-foot diameter Atlas V with up to 5 SRBs and the 18-foot diameter Vulcan Centaur with up to 6 SRBs. All a lot of very impressive modifications, and that's not all that ULA has been doing, not even close. They've also been carrying out the kinds of tests at the Cape that we've grown accustomed to seeing at Boca Chica. For example, fuel tank pressure tests, at least for liquid oxygen. The next step is liquid methane, and so far, everything's been passing with flying colors. And in conjunction with these kinds of tests, you would also expect to see static fires. But those were supposed to happen during the summer, and of course, they haven't happened, and we have no idea when they are going to be happening. And this, to be perfectly frank, really pisses me off. And it's not just me. According to a lot of inside sources, the folks at ULA, a lot of their engineers, are getting very frustrated with Blue Origin as well. This is an extremely promising rocket that can do a lot of things that current rockets simply cannot, in terms of payload fairing size, in terms of its flexibility, the fact that it uses both a liquid methane type of fuel for its first stage and liquid hydrogen for the second stage. This unique combination of fuel types and engines are going to give the Vulcan, at least in theory, the flexibility to set up the most efficient logistical chain between Earth and the Moon in the future. And I'm going to explain why that's the case, why the Vulcan is so good compared to every other rocket coming out in the near future in just a few moments. And by the way, what you're watching right now is ULA components being shipped over to Dynetics for testing. That's right, Dynetics handles a great deal of the testing for ULA. Why? Well, to have a third party handle this kind of testing means that there's less likely to be corruption or tweaking of tests, that sort of thing, to make sure that components pass. Instead, you have a third party that, well, they're allied with ULA, but they're less driven to pass a component if there are any problems. And this has been a very good system that has worked well for both companies for some time. But the point I'm trying to make is all the components of Vulcan Centaur thus far have been passing with flying colors. There have been no significant issues whatsoever, except with the BE-4 engines. So you have Blue Origin sabotaging all the work that Dynetics, ULA, and everybody else involved with this project has been investing in it. And that is just unacceptable. And now ULA is putting the screws to Blue Origin by forcing them to develop the BE-4 as quickly as possible because the Atlas V is being retired. So what about the Vulcan makes it better? Well, for one thing, in theory, these BE-4 engines are significantly more powerful than the Russian engines that the Atlas V uses. It can take more SRBs than the Atlas V can, and the upper stage, which used to be called the Advanced Cryogenic Evolve Stage, or ACES. This is one of the biggest advantages that this rocket has. It's powered not by Blue Origin engines, but by Aerojet Rocketdyne engines that run off of liquid hydrogen. It is this upper stage that is going to give ULA the logistical advantage over all of their competitors when it comes to cargoes going to and from the moon, because the moon has hydrogen and oxygen in abundance, but no methane, which means you can generate as much in situ fuel as you need from the moon for this second stage and use it to transport cargoes to and from the moon, kind of like a tug. And as you've been seeing, Vulcan will also have reusable main engines that will re-enter the atmosphere using an advanced inflatable shield and parafoil and then be retrieved by a helicopter, very much like Rocket Lab is planning to do. So you'll have a reusable second stage and reusable engines on the first stage. And of course, on-orbit refueling, just like SpaceX. But one of the biggest advantages is the fact that you'll be able to use in-situ fuel from the moon to power this second stage indefinitely. This is something that even Starship can't do because Starship runs off of methalox. And as I said, there's no methane on the moon. So you're looking at less than $100 million per launch and a second stage that can be used over 100 times once you get it into space. This will be incredibly useful for any cargo going to and from the lunar surface. And they have a lot of different designs utilizing the Centaur stage that will take advantage of this, and we'll get to that in a moment. But look at the construction methods. This is kind of the anti-Starship. Instead of using heavy stainless steel, which is fine, but this uses a type of aluminum that is so finely and precisely milled that it's 2/3 the weight of traditional aluminum. That allows this rocket to be huge and to be able to carry a very large payload and yet have a very, very small amount of weight. So with that kind of combination, you can get a lot of payload into orbit or into higher orbits or all the way to the moon, as I said, while utilizing the minimum amount of fuel. This is an extremely efficient design, extremely efficient construction, and cutting-edge technology and innovation. The kind of things that I like in a rocket company, in a launch provider. So why wouldn't I like ULA? I like SpaceX as well, but I think that the two companies are worthy competitors. In your case you're thinking that ULA doesn't have SpaceX's vision, well, here's what ULA has advertised on their own website. Yes, it's not as ambitious as what Elon Musk has proposed, but still, it advocates the creation of a massive economy, $3 trillion in a cislunar economy driven by lunar tugs like the Centaur upper stage. And this is something that the Vulcan was simply designed to do, was create and drive this kind of economy. And by the way, here is a fuel depot that is based on the Centaur upper stage, or ACES. Yes, ACES has kind of been abandoned, but that doesn't mean the concept has been abandoned, just a different version of it for the future. But this will carry oxygen and hydrogen mined on the moon and available to anybody who can make it to LEO, refuel, and then proceed on to the moon to take advantage of the resources there. And also look at this concept, utilizing a Bigelow BE-330 module and a Centaur upper stage to drive it again like a tug. And this could carry a hell of a lot of propellant and a hell of a lot of oxidizer. This could even prove useful to Starship. It might be more effective to use a depot like this than a Starship tanker. And as far as the engines on the upper stage are concerned, they're good old reliable RL-10 engines from Aerojet Rocketdyne, running, as I've said a couple of times, off of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. These engines have been in use for many, many years. They're very reliable, and they simply intend to use more of them as the Centaur evolves as time goes by. So this part is also taken care of. Really, everything about the Vulcan has been developing at a good pace, on schedule. The only thing that isn't on schedule are those damn BE-4s, and you can trace the blame back to only one company, and I don't think I need to repeat what that company is. So the chips are down. Everything is on the line right now. Atlas V is being retired. ULA will no longer be able to rely on Atlas to carry their payloads in the very near future. It will be illegal for them to carry military payloads after 2023 because they use Russian engines. It is absolutely vital that Blue Origin do their one damn job and get those engines completed. Otherwise, they are putting one of the most venerable and, in my opinion, best rocket companies in the United States in serious jeopardy. In many ways, I prefer SpaceX, but ULA is stepping up to the plate and delivering some impressive innovation and impressive technology themselves, and I can't take anything away from them because of that. The only mistake they've made, and it's a big one, is putting their trust in Jeff Bezos and his organization. They simply move too slow and are too unambitious to get the job done in time, and there are entirely too many things on the line right now. Not just ULA and their military contracts, but also the creation of a cislunar economy. The Vulcan is one of the best possible tools to do that. Yes, Starship can do it as well, but Starship is going to be focusing on Mars primarily, not on the moon, whereas Vulcan was made to take advantage of the moon. It's a perfect tool to be used in conjunction with Artemis as our presence on our natural satellite continues to increase. So, Blue Origin and Jeff Bezos needs to respond. Are they going to? I'm afraid I've got my doubts. But now that Atlas V is being retired, Blue Origin only has two options left: get the job done or get ready to go to court. And given their indefensible position that they have, if they fail to get the job done, it seems to me the better option is to simply get the engines done regardless of what it takes. If you like what I have to say, if you like how blunt I tend to be about these types of topics and about my opinions, you know how to support me. It's all in the description, or a simple like and a subscribe, and I will be very happy. So until Blue Origin finally comes through and gets something done right for a change, I urge all of you to stay angry about space.